Where does Tennessee rank among the rivals for the Razorbacks? Well, that answer probably varies a lot depending on the sport that we're talking about.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome in, everybody, to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I'm Curtis Wilgerson, joined once again by Andrew Ellis for our Friday Pot at the Palace bombastic crossover episode, where we essentially look at the next opponent on the Razorback football schedule, and we dive into some of our favorite moments and look into that rivalry from the basketball and baseball side of things, because we're the basketball and baseball dudes. This week, it is the Tennessee Volunteers. Arkansas is about a 2-touchdown underdog. Andrew, are you smelling an upset, or are you preparing yourself for another sad night in Fayetteville?
Well, regardless of whether or not I smell an upset, Curtis, I'm preparing myself for a sad night in Fayetteville, and I encourage everyone else to do the same. Prepare for the worst, hope for the best. Is that what they say?
There you go.
That's kind of where I'm at. Look, and we talked about it yesterday. It's not that I don't see any path to victory for Arkansas. I think Tennessee's a damn good team, but damn good teams underachieve in college football all the time. We saw that with Kentucky, Ole Miss. So there's like little parts of me every now and then where I'm like, you know what? I could, I kind of start talking myself in, but ultimately, Curtis, it's more so on the side of preparing for a sad night, preparing for, the job not to get done, which is fine. I'm not gonna lose too much sleep over it.
There we go. Well, let's before we dive into the basketball and baseball side of this, let's do one football question. Let's do an exercise here. If Arkansas was to pull off this upset Saturday against Tennessee, that's under the lights, Donald W. Reynolds Razorback Stadium, 6:30. It's a stripe out, prime time. If it was to happen, give me one reason, just one, why it would happen for the Razorbacks.
I spoke about this a little bit on the show. I don't know if it was Monday or Tuesday on Inside Arkansas Live that we were talking about this, but I talked about the dynamics of doing something that is harder than you expected it to be. It's the one thing that just mentally drains you, where, that fatigue sets in, because fatigue and adversity set in during any football game. But when it's tougher than you thought it was going to be, and I think that's what happened to Ole Miss last week. They had an awesome crowd. They had everyone in town. You had a 2-2 Kentucky team coming to town. There was absolutely no world that whole week where they were like, hey, we're about to be in a dogfight. And if you realize halfway through that you're in a dogfight and the team you're playing is kind of in that mentality the whole time, that can overwhelm you a little bit. And so that would really be my reasoning. Is it's going to take an underachieving performance from Tennessee, if you ask me. And I think, coming off a bye week, being 4-0, being number 4 in the country, facing a team that's already had a couple hiccups, I think Tennessee would be well within their rights to let their guard down a little bit. And so who knows? I think if you get into that atmosphere and it turns out to be harder than they thought, I could see, there being some shakiness there. And, everyone's done the thing of this is Tennessee's first real test. And I don't necessarily buy it, but I do think that this might be the right kind of test that they need to face. And we'll see if Tennessee's able to overcome that.
Yeah, for sure. You got to drag them boys out into deep waters, make them uncomfortable, let them see something they haven't seen yet. And so I think for me, you just a specific thing that I think would have to happen there. Nico Iamaleava, did I say that right? I might have.
I'm going to give it to you. That was good.
Pretty close. I did better than Sam Pittman did. I'll tell you that right now. So it seems to me like he would have to, the lights would have to get a little bright for him. Right. Have that freshman hiccup. He's a redshirt freshman, whatever. But he hasn't seen that type of adversity yet, because they've outscored teams 78-3 in the first quarter of football games. They put things away early. And so if you shorten the game a little bit, let it get weird, muck it up some, and then all of a sudden you're closing in on halftime or early in the second half, and it's a dogfight. How is he going to respond to that? He hasn't had to before. And so I think that's probably about the only pathway there. But I'm with you. It's going to be a tall task for the Razorbacks, no doubt about it. But, hey, we've talked a lot about football. We want to talk about Tennessee and some other areas, and we're going to do that. We're going to get into some of the memorable moments between Arkansas and Tennessee on the hardwood, on the diamond, kind of dive into where the Vols stand as a rival for the Razorbacks. But first, I want to take just a moment here to talk to you about our friends over at Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get rates and perks that are usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash, receive unlimited 1% deposit bonuses, and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA account. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at robinhoodgold.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, Angie, let's get into it, man. Basketball, Arkansas, Tennessee. This is it's just always fun. And we'll talk about the rivalry aspect of it here in a little bit when we close the show. But going back and looking at the series, man, Arkansas actually trails it 22-26, which pretty evenly matched, which is about what I expected before I went and looked it up. Interestingly enough, I have so many memories of Arkansas, Tennessee that stand out to me in basketball. I'm going to give you my favorite one, and I'm going to let you dive into it, but I'll never forget. And I think I've told you this story before, but me and a couple buddies, we took a road trip before I moved down to Fayetteville when I was still living in St. Louis. And we drove to Oklahoma City and we watched Thunder and Bucks, and Giannis hit a game winner from the baseline. It was a fun time. And then we drove overnight after that game from Oklahoma City to Fayetteville because they were getting ready to play Tennessee that next morning. And we pulled up at the hotel across the street from Baum. I think it was like the Stay Bridge or whatever at the time. And it was like 2:30 in the morning. And we're getting our bags out and we're getting ready to go walk and check in. And then we see this dude walk out the hotel lobby outside, and it's Jalen Barford. And because of the patch in the hair, right?
Yeah.
And he's just got a baddie on either side of him. And it's 2:30 in the morning and it's an early game the next day. And I'm like, this dude's not locked in. He's not ready to play. There's no way. Well, then he went out there and served one up on Tennessee.
He was ready to play.
And it was an awesome game, man. So much fun. Up until that Auburn game with the court storming, that was probably the loudest I've ever heard Bud Walton Arena. Big game by Dan Gafford. Goes to overtime. Macon hit some big shots. Anton Beard hit some big shots. It was
huge three.
Yeah, it was absolutely nuts. That is always forever going to be my favorite Arkansas Tennessee memory. Now, I did the SEC tournament was randomly in St. Louis a couple months later, and Tennessee beat the crap out of Arkansas. That was like the Admiral Schofield, Grant Williams, John Fulkerson, Jordan Bone. It was that team. So that wasn't a lot of fun, but at any rate, that's definitely my favorite Arkansas Tennessee basketball memory. It was awesome.
I feel like that game gets kind of like thrown under the radar, and because there's been so many cool moments since then. But when you hear people talk about the loudest Bud Walton Arena moments, you hear that Kentucky John Calipari getting ejected. You hear like that Auburn game, of course, and they played Kentucky there a couple weeks later. That was pretty loud. But that Tennessee game, which I believe, did it go to overtime or not quite?
It did.
It did go to overtime.
It did.
Daniel Gafford had a dunk down the stretch that kind of sealed it. And I remember that being the moment where it was like, while he was about right here, the crowd just went nuts. And I remember the Anton Beard clutch three down the stretch, which everyone saw coming. It's weird, Curtis. I pulled up Hogstats, our guy, Sloppy, our guy Hogstats, who does just a great job of commemorating, and just you're able to relive so much being on Hogstats.com. So check that guy out. But I was going through the series history, Curtis, and it's weird because I remember so many good moments of this series. So I was kind of a little bit surprised to see them trailing the overall. But then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, man, dude, they never win in Knoxville there, and they're only 4-16 in Knoxville. But there were a couple that I'd kind of forgotten about. Curtis, in 2006, way back in the day, Ronnie Brewer and Jonathan Modica went to Knoxville and knocked off a number 10 Tennessee team, clamped up Dane Bradshaw, clamped up Chris Lofton. Like it was just a cool little win there that I'd kind of forgotten. Also, one that just kind of sticks out in recent memory because I remember being there for it. You remember Arkansas and Tennessee played a game at home in one of those must years where it was, let's see, I have the score right here. It was, I think, 58-48.
Oh, yeah,
58-48, and it was a top 25 matchup. Number 23, Arkansas. Number 16, Tennessee. Arkansas gets the win. Not the most memorable game, but I remember that moment being a fun one.
You know what the most memorable thing about that game was? That was the the Rick Barnes freaking out over Jalen Williams taking charges game.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's the Wes Rucker wrote that article where he's like, they should ban Jalen Williams from basketball. It's like, okay, relax. Another one is the Arkansas team that went to the SEC title game that somehow, won, or I believe won the SEC title. Or no. They lost to Georgia in the SEC title. I believe this would have been 08. Well, they had the Stephen Hill game winner in the SEC semifinals, 92-91. Stephen Hill, who I don't believe had made a field goal that entire game, just
Razorback
in the
legend.
game winner. And they beat Tennessee in the SEC tournament. And at that point, you're like, holy cow, this Arkansas team might just be a team of destiny. And of course, they were not. But I remember that being a really fun one when I was a kid to watch.
That's pretty good, man. I remember Eric Musselman's first year when everything got shut down with COVID and everything. They went to Tennessee and kind of got one put on them, and they were a little bit shorthanded in that game. It might have been a suspension or something that game. It was weird, but then they came back to Bud later in the year, and it's when like Isaiah Joe was healthy and Arkansas was kind of starting to figure it out. And you thought like they might get on a heater and make the tournament, whatever. I don't think they would have, but Muss will tell you otherwise. Anyway, that's Mason Jones put 37 on them boys and Bud Walton in that game, and they beat up on them pretty good. And that's one that I definitely remember too. But it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, moving forward, especially getting into it. John Calipari is at Arkansas, so is Jonas Adu, and it's the first SEC game. Adu gets to go back to Knoxville, see Tennessee. That's going to be an absolute
That's exactly
banger.
what you want to start SEC play. The hardest game on your schedule, pretty much.
It's going to be a banger, man. I can't wait for it. Now, on the baseball side of things, it's interesting, man. I know you're licking your chops to talk about this. I just, we talk about it every time, but like I covered baseball on the beat for 1 year when I started. It was the year right before you joined me over at Hog Sports. And I feel like I kind of got to witness what really set this thing off in terms of the Vitello DVH thing. Arkansas wins that series 2-1 on the road, and then go to the SEC tournament and beat them in the championship game there. It was a lot of fun, and you could definitely tell, even though it was still like restricted crowds and everything like that. But man, the atmosphere, the juice, it just felt a little bit different when those teams got together, and it's just it's continued to be that. Now, I mean, you got Tennessee, Vitello's got his ring, DVH doesn't. It just only adds to it. But I would say some very good memories of Arkansas, Tennessee.
I mean, yeah, that 2021 season was, every weekend was like a classic. Like every single weekend was like, it felt like the national title was on the line. And that's Tennessee series, which I believe every game came down to like 1 or 2 runs. I know Arkansas erased a 5-0 deficit in that first game because I think Wicklander got roughed up, which he really didn't get roughed up that entire year. But they score like 5 or 6 on him in the first 2 or 3 innings. Arkansas kind of works their way back, gets that game 1 win. Jackson Wiggins gave up the walk-off in game 2 to kind of set up a rubber match. And then Jackson Wiggins got his revenge because in the SEC tournament, like you said, that finale, he got to start and pitch pretty well then. But I just one thing that I remember, and this is going to actually, the next 2 things I say are going to be kind of depressing to look back on for Hog fans. But I remember DVH saying that he told the team before that SEC championship game, he said, I'm going to do everything I can to put you guys in a position to win this game. And I know that it's the SEC tournament. Teams don't usually empty the clip, don't do all this. You don't bring your closer Kevin Kopps back for a second appearance. But he was like, you guys have been playing so hard all year, and you've been so like you've been in it and fighting the entire way. Mm-hmm. Like, I want you guys to have this achievement. Like, I want you to have this moment, even if we have to use Kevin Kopps, which they did, and they end up winning that finale game. I remember Cullen Smith, who's from Tennessee, had a huge home run in that game. But Curtis, another series that sticks out to me, 2019. Which I guess that would have been Tony Vitello's second year in Tennessee. They had that was a year that Tennessee overachieved like crazy, and you could kind of tell right then that something was brewing in Knoxville. But at that point, Arkansas was coming off of what should have been a national title winning season. Ended up going to Omaha later that year, but they came to Fayetteville, and it was one of those moments where it was like DVH was like, "Hey, not yet. You're going to be a great program. You're going to run college baseball here soon, but not yet." And Arkansas sweeps them. They had a young man by the name of Garrett Crochet, who is now the ace for the Chicago White Sox and going to be pitching with Hagen Smith in the future. He pitched, and he was throwing like 100. And I remember Jacob Nesbitt hitting a huge 3-run home run And I was like, holy cow, it's Arkansas's day. And Casey Opitz, I believe, had a walk-off in the Sunday finale to clinch the sweep. And, you know, Arkansas also swept Tennessee in 2023 in baseball, which is pretty cool. I remember that series because Trey Biddy, of all people, I wouldn't say the diamond is necessarily Trey Biddy's favorite thing to consume, but Hagen Smith pitched so well in that series that Trey texted me the next day and was like, yo, did you watch that Hagen Smith game, bro? He was dicing. Like,
No,
it was
no,
when
I
they were
didn't
using him
catch
out
that
of the
one.
bullpen. And he like came in and I think he threw 4 2/3 and struck out like 11 or something like that. And Trey was like, dude, what the hell is that? Like, even he was like taken back by it. But Arkansas, it's weird that they've kind of like always won the battle with Tennessee, but Tennessee wins the war because they get the big moments, that everyone remembers later on. But in terms of the actual like Arkansas versus Tennessee matchup, Arkansas slick kind of owns it in baseball. And now basketball, not quite as much, but here in recent history, Arkansas baseball has done really well against Tennessee, and they'll get them in Fayetteville again this year. So we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think Arkansas fans would much rather win the national title, but there's a lot of really fun memories to look back on with Tennessee.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I cannot wait for that series this season. And where would the Vols kind of fit into that rivalry scale? We've been ranking these SEC teams on the last few weeks here. We did Auburn, we did Texas A&M. We're going to talk about it with Tennessee, but first we're going to take a quick break, so stay tuned. Folks, if you're trying to get last-minute tickets for this Arkansas-Tennessee game Saturday night, or I don't know, maybe you're making plans for Razorback basketball season, all the big marquee matchups they've got coming up, whether it's the charity exhibition against Kansas or Madison Square Garden against Michigan. Man, they got a lot coming up and people want to be there. And there's really no better place to find the perfect tickets for you and your family and friends than Game Time. I got to tell you, Game Time has a new feature I really like. It's called Game Time Picks. It makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you the incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands and thousands of tickets. They've got a lot of really cool stuff on the app. You got to check it out. Seat views. You can get a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy. You know exactly what you're getting yourself into before you make the purchase. They got a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Game Time ticket coverage as well. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Just take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, just create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Well, it's game time. All right, back for the final segment here, the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, crossover edition, Pot at the Palace Bombastic. Let's rank these dudes as rivals. Tennessee. This is really interesting. From a football perspective, I don't know. It doesn't strike me as a rivalry. I just think it's cool because we don't see it that often when Tennessee comes to town. Now, the Vols have kind of historically controlled the series, but Arkansas has won 3 in a row there. I don't sense any bad blood. I don't think of a lot of drama. I guess you could go back, to the Sterner days if you wanted to, but it's I just think it's a cool matchup more than I think it's a rivalry. And it's one that I wish we would see more often. And maybe with the new scheduling dynamics in the SEC, maybe we will.
Yeah, it's weird. We're like Arkansas fans probably don't have a ton of animosity towards Tennessee because there haven't been a ton of installments, like you said, of these memories that they have. And most of the memories are pretty positive. 06, you get game day coming to town. You win that game with Darren McFadden and Mitch Mustaine. I believe he actually maybe got benched in that game or got hurt, and that's what kind of paved the way to Casey Dick taking over. And then you had the Joe Adams punt return, of course. You had Mike Woods dominating Tennessee. Like, Arkansas's had pretty good success. Even 2015, they win in Knoxville, which that game in the moment, I remember kind of thinking that saved Brett Bielema's job, and that team ends up going 8-5, and we end up seeing a good year from them. And it all kind of started with that game in Knoxville. And so, yeah, it's been all sunshine and rainbows for Arkansas against Tennessee. So yeah, it's weird that these teams don't match up as a ton, even though they're not far away. And it's just kind of one of those things, the way the SEC scheduling has worked out, and SEC scheduling has undergone like 7 huge changes over the last decade. So it just seems like it has been one of those that's gotten lost in the shuffle. But yeah, not a ton of crazy history and the fan bases, which do get pretty heated for basketball and baseball, they kind of sit the football one out. So I mean, if we're ranking them, Curtis, like middle of the pack to the bottom, to like they're like maybe top 10. I really don't know. They're not very high.
Yeah, for sure. I was thinking, yeah, middle of the pack. Maybe not the very bottom tier because I think I care less about Vanderbilt. I care less about, some other teams there.
Kentucky.
The thing about Tennessee is they're always pretty good. Like it's very rare that a really horrible Tennessee team pops up on your schedule. So there's always some excitement or some anticipation about the matchup. But yeah, I think middle of the pack, like we talked about A&M, Auburn, I don't put Tennessee as a rival anywhere near that level from football. Basketball, I feel sort of the same way, but probably a little bit higher, like maybe the upper middle of the pack. It's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out with Cal and Rick Barnes, especially now that Rick Barnes has kind of broken through a little bit. He got to an Elite Eight. We'll see how this works out with Jonas Adu. I know when he signed with Arkansas out of the transfer portal, Rick Barnes kind of had some thoughts about it. Like he's good at not taking direct shots, but taking shots, and what it means. So that'll be interesting. But I think the reason why this could be, I don't think it's going to be one of Arkansas's more heated rivals. I mean, that in basketball, that's going to be Kentucky. It's going to be, Alabama even, because Nate Oates is just an easy guy to hate, whatever. But what brings the allure to Arkansas, Tennessee as a basketball rivalry is both the teams are just going to be really freaking good every year. Like they're always going to be in the conversation, always going to be in the mix at the top of the SEC, always going to be on that short list of, hey, if things break the right way, this could be a Final Four type of team. And so every single time those guys hook up, whether it's in Knoxville, in Fayetteville, at the SEC tournament, whatever, there's going to be a lot behind it. There's going to be some cachet. It's going to be on the major networks, and it's going to matter. They're going to be playing for something. So is it heated? Do I hate Tennessee like you were talking about earlier? No, not at all. Not really. But did those matchups mean a little bit more? Sure. So I would probably put them upper middle of the pack in basketball, I think.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think they're probably top 5, frankly, at least right now. Obviously these things are subject to change and just kind of the way it feels. I mean, I feel more, there's more heat between that one than there is even Arkansas, like Mississippi State. Even though in Arkansas, Mississippi State have played a lot, and
Agreed.
and Jans is gonna have that program doing pretty well. They'll be respectable, but it's like even Ole Miss hasn't evolved into a big rival yet. They will very soon, in very short order. And it is weird how these things change so much over time. Where if we had done this 8 years ago, Curtis, we would have been like, they're a bottom tier football rival, a bottom tier basketball rival, and a bottom tier baseball rival, because there was no history there. But then all it takes is, two coaches to kind of have that little bit of a skirmish, or to have just success from both programs, which Arkansas and Tennessee, I would say, have been over the last 8 years, been the consistent top upper echelon of the SEC. And so, yeah, that's what kind of breeds these rivalries. And some of these moments that we've literally just referenced that were in the last 5-6 years, that's what kind of builds these things. And so I think Tennessee's kind of creeping up there for me as a basketball rival. And I'm sure that game in Knoxville to start SEC play is gonna have some heat behind it. I mean, Jonas Adu, now there's players transferring from team to team. And so it's definitely interesting. And baseball's kind of the same way, probably a little bit higher just because Tennessee is now like the program in college baseball.
Yep.
And the Tony V thing is undeniable. Like that's always going to be a huge one. So they're probably in the top 3 for baseball, weirdly enough. In basketball, I think they're kind of creeping up towards that top 5, maybe top 6. But football, I think, kind of brings the overall average down, where if you're comparing it to the teams that we've done the last couple of weeks, we've done Texas A&M and we've done Auburn. I feel like those two programs, just overall, when you add it all together, I feel like they're a little bit higher, but not much.
Yeah, man, basketball wise, it's, not having divisions for the longest, I think helps with that a little bit, because you're not guaranteed to see Mississippi State twice every year, like, whatever. But the more I think about it, for me, like with basketball, Kentucky, okay. Texas, that's just naturally okay. Yeah. Alabama, all right. Really, after that, you could talk me into a number of teams at maybe that 4th and 5th spot, and Tennessee
Nobody's
actually probably be in there
over them.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. Baseball wise, I know you just touched on it, but real quick before we get out of here, like, is it not number 1 yet? Not there for you yet?
I don't know. It's just tough because it's like year to year. I think it changes. Like this year, that's going to be the number one. Like that's going to be the series that everyone pulls up at. Everyone was there. I mean, based on the attendance in 2023 when they played Tennessee, it'd be hard to argue that they're not number one. And perhaps Tennessee winning that title kind of just vaults them. But I think a little bit of it is it's like they're kind of number one for everyone a little bit.
Yeah.
Whereas like Alabama football was never Arkansas, but it's like that was always a big game. And so I think that maybe is a little bit more of a thing. And I hate to throw cold water on this whole thing, but DVH and Tony V, like they're very friendly. Like they like each other. Like there's not actual animosity there. Whereas like DVH and Jim Schlossnagle, who's now going to be at Texas, there's some heat there. You know, like those guys don't like each other. And so I think that kind of is a little bit of a layer. But I mean, if someone says Tennessee's number one, I'm not going to argue. I think worst case scenario, they're like third. But I think they're definitely in the conversation and a strong argument could be made.
Okay. Last thing before we get out of here. Good stuff, by the way. I love that. Big picture across all sports, Arkansas, Tennessee, where the Vols rank as a rival, over under 6.5.
So I'm just going to have to list these out just because my brain can't do the math like that.
All right.
A&M is a better rival for Arkansas than them. Like just across the board. Like we're not going to, there's up and down, but Texas.
Yep.
I would say LSU.
I would agree with that.
Ole Miss.
Yeah. I think
probably.
So. Yeah. I think
and
so.
And now it's getting a little bit thinner where it's like, you're like Auburn. Auburn and Tennessee, I feel like are kind of similar.
They're pretty close there.
I think I might give Tennessee the nod over Auburn simply because Auburn is like consistently, I think when we talked about that, they're like consistently like your fifth or sixth best rival, but Tennessee's like one or two in a couple of these. I think I might say Tennessee and Auburn are similar. Mississippi State, I don't know. Is there really any heat between Arkansas and Mississippi State?
Not really. Missouri is just so bad.
Missouri's a better rival. Let's honestly be honest.
I was gonna say they're so bad, like at baseball, that nobody cares.
Yeah. And
even though they're bad at basketball, there's a hatred there amongst the fan bases, and there is for football too. So from a like heated rivalry standpoint, I might actually put that up there, which would give Tennessee like worst case probably the 6th spot, unless we're just completely overlooking somebody. And I don't know that we are. Like Oklahoma, they just got to the league. They're not there yet. Yeah.
Right. So I mean, I think Tennessee's 6, in that 5 to 7 range. They're like a sneaky rival.
Yeah, there we go. We've talked ourselves into it. I like it a lot, but
that's how rivalries are formed. Two guys just kind of be like, yeah.
Good times. Well, hey, that's gonna wrap us up here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast, the crossover edition. Arkansas has a bye week next week, so we probably won't do this next Friday, but we might get creative and still join forces and see if we can come up with something. We're gonna get out of here for now. So for Andrew Ellis, it's been Curtis Wilkerson, the Locked On Razorbacks podcast crossover edition. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. We will talk to you next time. Everybody have a good one.